Hello and welcome to, I guess, what amounts to my 2023 TBR. I decided to do the 12 book challenge, which is essentially you get 12 people to recommend you 12 books. I actually have 11 people because my boyfriend is incapable of following instructions, but I have 12 books and it is the 12 book challenge, which is close enough. But yeah, I posted this on basically all my social media so that people could recommend me books, and I'm going to read them in 2023. You problem child. She takes a nap, I start filming, and she's like, time for parkour. So I'm just gonna go through all these books. I plan on vlogging this next year. I haven't exactly decided how or what. I don't own any of these books. I have my two boyfriends' recommendations because he owns them, so I'm gonna borrow them from him. But beyond that, I don't own any of these books, and I don't know how many of them are at the library, so I'm gonna have to like figure that out, figure out how to get copies if I have to buy some, which is fine, and then vlog it, and it might be like a 2-part vlog because 12 books for one vlog would be a very lengthy vlog. So I'm just gonna go through the books now because there are 12 of them. So the first book was recommended by my best friend. She recommended Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is I think it's fantasy sci-fi thing. Basically it's about this little cafe in Japan, I think, in Tokyo, and basically they serve you coffee and you can go back in time, like, to relive a moment basically until the coffee gets cold. And it's very sad, apparently, and sweet, like a very like bittersweet book. She says she cries a lot while reading it, so I'm very excited. I've heard a lot about this over the years. I know it's quite beloved by a number of people on here, so I'm actually really excited for this one. And then the two books my boyfriend recommended me, I'm doing the two like IRL people first, because he's incapable of following directions. So the first is A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick. This is a Philip K. Dick book. I don't know. He loves this movie as well as this book, and I refuse to watch the movie because the animation style gives me a headache. I've seen the trailer and it's just like, I can't sit through a whole movie of that. I don't know what this is about. I know nothing about this except that he loves it. He likes Philip K. Dick, but this is like for sure his favorite, and I think the movie definitely has something to do with that. It's called The Most Unnerving Drug Novel Ever Written. It's about a dude who like is dealing an illegal addictive drug and a cop is trying to take him down, and I assume there's a lot more going on considering it's a Philip K. Dick book, but we'll see. Hopefully I like this. Explain. Are you helping today or are you getting in the way? Are you helping or are you in the way? You're being a menace. Just being a menace. The second thing he recommended me is Thicker, the Book of Lost Things by John Connolly. This is, I think, YA. I'm gonna say YA because it seems awfully thick for a middle grade. It's about a 12-year-old whose mother died, and essentially he starts, the line between like reality and fantasy starts to blur, and his family is like falling apart, I think, and stuff and things. I think he like delves into a fantasy realm at some point, but my boyfriend read this I think when he was a kid, or like a teenager, and he really enjoyed it. He's always really loved this book, so I shall be reading it and seeing if I love it too. And then getting into like the booktube sphere, I was recommended Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This comes from Abbey of Palinor. This is the high fantasy adult novel. It's Robin Hobb. It's called The Assassin's Apprentice. I assume it's about an assassin's apprentice. I've heard so much about this book constantly, or like the whole series, because I know it's a series, and like I've always meant to read it and I never have. So now I'm gonna read it. I don't read much fantasy, but I'm definitely trying to get more into it because I do like enjoy a lot of aspects of it. So I'm hoping this will be like a new beloved favorite book for me because I would really love to like get into Robin Hobb. Reading This Life recommended O Caledonia by Elspeth Barker, which is a coming of age gothic novel from the early 90s. I've read the description like 3 times and I still couldn't tell you what it's about. Apparently a young heroine who is lonely and alone. I don't really know, but it looks interesting. It looks like a very fascinating book. It's been compared to like Shirley Jackson and the Brontes and Edgar Allan Poe, so I'm guessing like it's very like gothic and such, and it looks really good. Like it gets very good reviews, so I'm very excited for this one. I hadn't heard of it, and this is also one that like I might have to buy this one because I'm getting the vibe that like my library might not have it, but it looks really, really good. Charlie Brooke recommended Miss Benson's Beetle by Rachel Joyce, which is a historical fiction book set just after World War II in London about an old spinster school teacher who's like just getting by, and she kind of decides to like ditch her life and hires an assistant, and they travel the world, and they're like kind of an odd couple, I think. That's all I know about it. It also gets really, really good ratings, so super stoked on it. I'm super stoked on all of these because y'all recommended some interesting looking books that I hadn't heard of. Spines and Spoilers recommended These Fleeting Shadows by Kate Alice Marshall, which is a young adult horror novel about a young girl whose mother and her like leave their family home and cut off contact with their extended family, and then years later her grandfather leaves the property to her under the condition that she has to stay there for a full year or she forfeits it. And then horrifying things happen. I know it was one of her favorite books of this year, so I don't read much horror. I've been trying to get more into it to try to like branch out and see if I can find some horror that I like. So far I haven't, which doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't read much horror. So hopefully this is horror that I enjoy because I'm trying to read more horror anyway. Constellation Library on Instagram recommended Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry, which is a very like, I forget how it's described, soft fantasy, cozy fantasy. It has like, people describe it as something, but it's essentially about like, I think like an ogre and a human or something, I don't know. They open like a little, it's like a high fantasy novel, but it's like cozy and sweet, and like they decide to open like a little coffee shop together, and it's like charming, and everyone loves this book. So I don't normally go for like the happy fluffy things, but everyone loves this book, so I'm thinking I will as well. One for the Books recommended Lark Ascending by Silas House, which is a dystopic novel. Essentially America has fallen to like religious nationalists, and nowhere is safe and nowhere is taking like American refugees, so Lark and his family kind of leave their home, go to Ireland, but Ireland doesn't take them either, and Lark's like the last member of the family left and stuff, and things happen. I don't really read the full descriptions of these books, but again, y'all recommend some interesting stuff because this book has really high ratings as well. Like everything y'all are recommending is like more than an average of 4 on Goodreads, which is pretty high rating. So again, had not heard of this. Sounds fascinating. Reading with Tatiana recommended Exhalation by Ted Chiang, which is a collection of short stories by Ted Chiang that are science fiction, dystopian maybe, or maybe just sci-fi. I don't know anything about them. I don't really read descriptions for short stories, but I love short stories, so haven't read like a collection of science fiction short stories, and I do like science fiction. I try to like science fiction, I should say. I want to like science fiction, but so much of it is not great, but this looks good. And again, average rating of 4.27, so y'all are recommending me some like highly rated books. Javier Hernandez recommended me Percy Jackson by Rick Riordan, which I have never read. Somehow I have missed out on the Percy Jackson hype train back in the day. I was like an awkward age for it because I was like just getting into more like older YA adult fiction when Percy Jackson was getting really big. Like I remember the first couple books being out, or at least when I took notice of it getting big. I was like kind of just getting out of like middle grade and fantasy stuff, and I was like a little bit too old but not old enough to still appreciate like middle grade, because I think it starts out as middle grade, maybe, unless I'm lying and making this up. I don't know, I've never read it, but I'm gonna read the first one and see if I like it, because I do like fantasy and like kids stories like that, and I know it's much beloved across age groups, so I'll give it a try. And then the final book on this list is Endymion Spring by Michael Skelton, which was recommended by Matilda Gothica. This I have read the description of and I can't say anything about it. I don't know what it's talking about. Something about a library and like there's a blank book, but like only the kid who touched it can read it. It's fantasy, it's historical fiction, it's middle grade. She recommended it, so I'm stoked to read it. I've not heard of this, but it sounds weird. It sounds like weird middle grade, like fantasy. Like, I don't know. It says mythical beasts. There's a library. You stumbled on something much larger than you can possibly imagine. I don't know. But it sounds good. So I don't really look into the books that I read. I don't like to, which is why I don't have much information on any of these, because sometimes descriptions get a little bit spoilery towards the end, so I'll have a tendency to like read the first couple sentences and be like, sure, I'm down, let's go. So lots of fantasy, lots of sci-fi, lots of dystopian stuff and horror, and it's gonna be an interesting time reading these books. So I'm very excited. Most of these get like incredibly high ratings on Goodreads, and I've not heard of most of them, so I'm really excited to like give them all a try and hopefully find some new favorites. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them if you have, and I will be back next year at some point to vlog this experience. I don't know when, probably not for a long time, but you might see these books crop up in my wrap-ups throughout the months, but I will eventually vlog my experience reading all of these. I just have to track them down and see what my library has and see, I guess more to the point, what it doesn't. But I'm very excited. I hope I enjoy all of these, and thank you so much for watching.